Ships Bill 2019. To discuss the bill, I have on the show with me Mr. Sanjay Bandyopadhyay, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Shipping, Dr. Vishwapati Trivedi, former Secretary, Ministry of Shipping, and Suyash Tiwari, Analyst at PRS Legislative Research. The Recycling of Ships Bill 2019 has been introduced in the ongoing winter session of Parliament and was passed by Lok Sabha. It sets certain standards and processes for safe recycling of ships and restricts the use of hazardous materials on ships.
Ship dismantling and recycling are currently regulated by a set of guidelines called the Shipbreaking Code 2013. The 2013 code governs ship recycling activity in India and lays down the standards for environmental protection and worker safety. The bill provides a legal framework for restrictions on use of hazardous materials on ships and sets certain standards for safe recycling. The bill applies to all current and new ships registered in India, ships entering a port in India, as well as ship recycling facilities operating in India.
So basically, every ship recycler must ensure the safety and environmentally sound removal and management of the hazardous material from the ship vessel. After doing this, I think we'll be much more transparent in this particular process, and we can save the human lives, we can save the sea lives or the other flora and fauna. One has to comply with the specified environmental regulations. So they must also ensure that no environmental damage is caused due to such recycling. Fine is good, but taking consideration the human life, one recycler or the competent authority or maybe the vessel owner also think on these lines to save the planet.
The Recycling of Ships Bill sets up two authorities to monitor and administer recycling activities and to inspect ships. These authorities will be notified by the central government. Ship owners must obtain a certificate on the inventory of hazardous materials from the national authority within 5 years. It must be maintained and updated through the life of the ship to reflect any changes in the ship's structure and equipment. The certificate can be suspended if the ship does not maintain an inventory of hazardous materials properly.
The problem in India is that these ships are not recycled in a closed environment or in a closed condition. It is done into the open seas. It is done in the intertidal waters. That means the ship is lying at berth in the water and the cutting happens in the water. And the danger is that most of these hazardous substances which are available in the ships, many of it actually flows out into the water. So this threat of hazardous substances contaminating your land, your water, your soil, your people is the biggest threat, and that is why there is a need for transparency in this.
For recycling of ships, the bill puts certain responsibilities on ship owners and owners of recycling facilities. Recycling is only permitted in authorized facilities. Owners of recycling facilities must apply for an authorization certificate. Ship owners who intend to dismantle ships must also apply for a recycling certificate. They must also prepare a ship recycling plan, and it must be approved by a designated authority after a physical inspection of the ship.
Sanjay, I wanted to begin the program with you and asking you as to what is the background of the ship recycling industry in India and also globally.
The ship recycling industry, if you see globally, it started with earlier the ships were wooden ship, and then it converted to the steel framed ships. And then where there were shipbuilding industry, there were also ship recycling industry, starting from UK, then Europe, US and other developed countries. But as the labor cost increased, it shifted to more cheaper labor countries. So presently, India is the largest ship recycler in the world. So as per the UNCTAD report in 2017, we have recycled 6,323 gross ton of ships. After India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, China, Turkey are the last ship recyclers. But we recycle the 30%, we recycle nearly 30% of the ship of the world. And we get steel out of it, which comes into our market and is used for different purposes. There are other materials also come out of this. So ship recycling industry is a big industry in India, and 99% of the recycling takes place in Gujarat, in a place called Alang and Sisoya. It has a huge market there of recycling, not only of the steel, of the furniture, the woodwork, various other materials which are coming out of this ship. So this is an important sector for us, and this bill is also a reformist bill, which brings many responsibilities to the ship recycler, to the government, and to other downstream industries.
Okay, Dr. Trivedi, you've been in leadership positions both in the ministry and then at the National Shipping Board. One of the things that I'd like to understand from you is, Sanjay started his comments by saying that ship building countries were also ship recycling areas, and now there has been a gradual shift. As a country, we've never been a large maritime faring nation. So what makes India such a great place for ship recycling, that we have such a large percent of ships getting recycled in India?
There's something very interesting about Alang. Why is it happening in Alang? Why is it not happening in Chennai? Or why is it not happening in Bhubaneswar? Alang is actually a tidal coast. So far, what is the value addition of this bill, or this act which is coming for recycling, according to the Hong Kong Convention? Hong Kong Convention has laid down guidelines, methodologies for breaking of ships and recycling of ships in the least polluting manner. In fact, the ship recycling activity is 100% green activity if everything gets used. But Alang has a tidal thing. So when the tide comes, the ship is dragged inside, and when that tide goes, the ship sits on the beach and it's cut. That's the way it's happening now.
So it's the beaching of a ship.
It's called the beaching.
Yeah.
You pull it on the beach and cut the front. Yeah. You again pull it, so gradually they keep pulling and the whole thing is cut. But that was causing a lot of pollution, a lot of dirt, a lot of radioactive material being spilled, deaths happening because they're not careful about the gases which are trapped in the fuel tanks. And I guess if my statistics is right, it's about, on the average, it's 1 death per day happening in. So this bill is very, very welcome, very, very welcome, and is going to actually provide a whole lot of very efficient framework. But as it happens, it might be a bit, it might require a bit of an infrastructure funding in that area, which the government is already doing. I believe there is a
JICA funding which is coming
Japanese
in.
Funding
JICA consultants are working on it, and they have already the Gujarat Maritime Board which is controlling that area. There are 133 operational plots, and they have been allotted by the Gujarat Maritime Board. They have created common facilities of dealing with the hazardous material coming out of it, basically burying them, burning them in a controlled way, oxidizing them in a controlled way, providing labor, staff quarters, providing hospital facilities.
Yeah, and Sanjay will talk about that. Suyash, very quickly, what is the statement and objects of the reason, states when it comes to this bill being taken up in Parliament?
So, certainly as discussed, this ship recycling industry is a very hazardous industry. In fact, the International Labour Organization has also classified it under hazardous industry. So, the larger idea that there needs to be a mechanism to make sure that the workers that are involved in the industry are safe, as well as the there needs to be enough measures to protect environment from the activities that are a part of the recycling process. So, India has ratified to the Hong Kong Convention, which has been passed by the International Maritime Organization, which was passed in 2009, which prescribes certain these parameters. So, it prescribes certain standards and processes which are required to be followed by the players involved in the ship recycling industry, as well as it introduces certain safeguards to protect the workers as well as the environment. So, that's the larger idea behind introducing the bill.
And Sanjay, that is something that you and I were talking about, that it's not only a question of conforming to an international convention, but it's also a question about what is the industry doing and what should be the responsibility for Indians.
The Hong Kong Convention is an accepted convention by the IMO, by all the countries. But the European Union is following a stricter norms. So, we have only ratified the Hong Kong Convention, but it is the bare minimum requirement for caring for the environment, that no pollution takes place because of ship recycling, plus most important, the health and safety of the workers who are working there. These are the two important things which we as a responsible democratic countries have to take care for next generation. Yeah. So, it brings in these facilities, and this is not a very large bill, this is a small bill, only giving minimum enabling provisions. There will be rules will be framed in consultation with all the stakeholders, and the ship recycling industry, the states have, in fact, they have supported this bill.
Okay. Sanjay, an additional thing that I wanted to ask you is that there is already a certain set of 2013 regulations and code in place. So, what is the idea of shifting it from a regulatory code-based mechanism to a, let's say, a legislative mechanism?
So, code doesn't give the teeth to the government and the authorities to take action against the people who are not conforming to the law, especially if, say, the whole beach is being polluted and the people, the fishermen are being affected, or there are accidents starts taking place, the workers start losing their limbs, their deaths. Then how does the government take action? The Gujarat Maritime Board, which will be the competent authority, takes action. It's through the act, through the bill is converted into act, that actions can be taken in case of any default by the responsible stakeholders. This is one of the things. Secondly, convention was covering many things, but after the Hong Kong Convention came in, certain new concepts have also come in. Those have to be brought as a rules under the bill. As time changes, technology also changes, the method of recycling changes, downstream use of the components which are coming out changes. So, therefore, this gives enabling provisions, this bill gives enabling provisions for all those things.
Not only enabling provisions, as you rightly pointed out, only Parliament has the authority to impose punishments and fines.
So, enabling provisions means these are certain provisions, necessary provisions stated. The rules which is again formed as a legislative process will give the details under this, how inspection are done, how certifications are done, how integrated database will keep track of hazardous material, of the accidents taking place in these industries.
Okay. And with that, it's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will discuss the obligations placed on ship recyclers with regard to workers in the facilities and penalties prescribed in the bill. Welcome back. On the program today, we are discussing the Recycling of Ships Bill 2019. The bill sets certain standards and processes for safe recycling of ships and restricts the use of hazardous material on ships.
The shipping bill specifies 3 responsibilities for ship recyclers with respect to working conditions in their facilities. First, they are required to maintain adequate measures for safety, health, training, and welfare of workers in their ship cycling facility. Second, ship recyclers must also provide comprehensive insurance coverage for regular as well as temporary workers. And third, they must comply with the specified environmental regulations and ensure safe and environmentally sound removal and management of hazardous materials from a ship.
The ship recycling industry is a labor intensive industry, and therefore we have to be very, very careful in recycling the vessels. Now, if you see a proper vessel which is being recycled in anywhere in India, we don't have any proper regulations for that. And if you go to any of the European recycling yards or something like that, you can find a proper group of men protected by a robust clothing, helmets, and oxy fuel torches and others. So one vessel will take not less than 4 months, because they'll cut the vessel piece by piece, and by taking everything into the consideration of the hazardous materials like asbestos, heavy minerals, or heavy waters, or the ballast water. If you'll go for this particular kind of a process, it will take at least 4 months. But in India, we don't have any kind of the regulations for this.
Recyclers dismantling without a certificate can be punished with an imprisonment of up to 1 year or a fine of up to 10 lakh rupees or both. Penalty for installing or using any prohibited hazardous material in a ship against the provisions of the Act will lead to imprisonment of up to 3 months or a fine of up to 5 lakh rupees or both. The penalty for not ensuring safe removal and management of any hazardous material from a ship will be punishable with imprisonment of up to 6 months or fine, which may extend to 5 lakh rupees or both.
Paint chips and all that, it's not collected properly, just go out into the ocean. And these paints that you have, the coating on top or is lying on that, so it is highly hazardous substance. The kind of there are many things which just go out into the water, whatever you do, because they are not contained. It's not. In any other country, most developed countries also have shipbreaking yards. It's not that they don't have. They do break their ships in these places. But why is it so expensive to do it there? And why is it so cheap and so beneficial here? Because you are compromising with the environment, you're compromising with human health. So it becomes a more profitable business as compared to when you do it in developed countries or you do it in countries which have systems in place.
The bill also lists down certain obligations on ship recyclers to take measures for protection of the environment, such as ensuring that there is no damage caused to the environment due to the recycling activities and taking the necessary measures for the protection of the environment. In the event of an oil spill, the ship recycler will be served a notice by a designated authority to take remedial action. For oil spills, the bill proposes to impose a graded penalty at the 12, 24 and beyond 24-hour mark for non-response to notices on the spill. They will be liable to pay for environmental damages and compensation for cleanup operation.
Dr. Trivedi, you've been involved with the shipping industry for some time in a regulatory capacity. What are the regulatory mechanisms and institutions that are being set in this bill? And what does it mean operationally on the ground for making those work?
To classify the stakeholders, I think there are 3 types of people here. One is the recycler, the industry. The other is the ships, because the ships don't belong to the recycler until they are bought by the guy, and then the international maritime community. So there are 2 parts of penalties as I see. One is on the recycler, which is the basic, the regulation, the intention of the regulation basically to control the activities of the recycling on our course. There, as you know, the penalties can be in terms of monetary numbers, but the responsibilities are plenty. As I think, the responsibility was always there. He had to maintain the environment. He had to cut the ship safely. He had to ensure that his workers are looked after. But they are not being doing. So, as Sanjay has said, that the regulation is a value addition to the extent that it brings a framework which has got teeth, which has got some value in the eyes of law. The code was just a code, it's like a dress code, but it's not enforceable. But it was enforceable in the Pollution Act would force it here, the Labour Act will there. Now this is a comprehensive legislation which brings everybody inside. There was this Maritime Environment Pollution Committee, MEPCs, which meet after so they've added a lot of other things. One of the things that they've done is to maintain a register. There's inspections and registers. In the current digitized environment, I think the effort of the government while making the rules should be that it should be a third-party certification. Not instituting Inspector Raj again, because that brings in a lot of bad ethical practices and a lot of a bad name to the government. There are two ways of having an arm's length. One is to digitize the whole thing. The shipper or the recycler files some kind of a return which is taken to be true unless proven otherwise.
Yeah.
The inspectors can do some sample checks, but not too many. And the ships, the register that they have to maintain about the hazardous material, it should not become a problem for the shippers or the shipping industry to every time every port checks it. It should be just all digitized, everybody to see what it is. Somebody has a doubt, he should go and check it out. Now that would make the implementation of this act light, simple and controversial, free of controversies.
Okay. Sanjay, so it's basically a question of regulatory balance. How much does the government intervene and how much is most of a self-declaration which then is to be checked later on by the authorities? So what is the bill trying to do when it comes to this regulatory balance?
So I will start with saying that out of 133 plot owners in Alang, 72 have already, 72 have already have the HKC certificates. And all this certification and inspections are done by professional class registration of organizations like the IR class, like the NYK and DVNG. They are international certification agencies. So government will have minimum interference in this, and all these provisions of the, first of all, if one reads the bill, we'll see it starts with some obligations on the ship owners not to add hazardous materials on the ships. Whatever is there and which cannot be removed from the engine room, etc., they will remain, but they have to be declared. There should be list of the hazardous materials. No new hazardous material should be added into the ship, and when he is selling it for recycling, it has to be declared upfront by him, so that the recycler knows, and he makes, when he makes this recycling plan, he puts all these materials, method of removal, the equipment to be used, how he has to neutralize the hazardous material upfront in the plan, and then the plan is then approved by the competent authority, which is a local authority. Like for example, for Alang it will be the local Gujarat Maritime Board or some other local officer who will be giving checking the plans and approving it. And then it comes, different acts are there, like we haven't entered into the Factory Act domain. The act has taken and synced with the Factory Act for the workers' benefit, for the responsibility of the recycler to take care of the worker. The Factories Act will come in, because the ILO, based on the ILO regulations, our Factory Act has also been amended and changed.
And there's already a comprehensive legislation which looks
we haven't tinkered with the Factory Act. It's Mother Act for all these kind of industry. But we have just laid a additional layer of insurance in case of death or accident which has taken place. This is the responsibility on the recycler to get all the workers, whether they are permanent or they are casual workers, to be insured under this. So there are many provisions in this, and then there is just a national authority which will be sending this information by digital means to the IMO, the amount of the number of ships recycled, the number of workers working. Then there are provisions for appeals in this, appeal to various authorities if for the people who are dissatisfied. And then of course there are offences and penalties. So as I told that already the plot owners, because of getting the ships from the international community and responsible countries, they have taken these HKC certificates.
Okay. So, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the offences and penalties that are there in the bill?
Yes. So, broadly, the offences and penalties are focused towards if the ship owners or the ship recyclers, if they are breaking some of the, if they are violating some of the provisions specified under the bill, then they have to pay certain offences and penalties. So, I'll just broadly mention the provisions that they have to follow and associated penalties with them. So, if you look at the during the life cycle of the ship owners are required to follow two kinds of processes. So, first is the bill specifies certain, the bill prohibits certain hazardous substances which the ships cannot carry. So, one is
and
that
for which a proactive disclosure has to be made, as Sanjay was saying.
Yes,
yeah.
And the other part is even the hazardous substances that they are carrying, they have to file an application with the national authority specifying that these are the
correct
substances that they are carrying. And if there is any violation of that particular provision, so it is punishable with imprisonment of up to 3 months or a fine of up to 5 lakh rupees or both.
I want to say that all offences under this act are non-cognizable, bailable and compoundable.
Okay.
Elaborate on this.
So, I mean, just for clarification, the
Please.
idea of these offences is that
Because you have to go to put this, if there is an offence, then you have to put this a case in the court of law,
yeah,
before a judicial magistrate, and if proved, then this penalty comes in,
yeah,
and it's compoundable. So imprisonment can be compounded by, say,
by paying of a fine.
paying of a fine.
Basically, the idea is that if you agree to the violation, then rather than going through a difficult and arduous long
Clear.
court process, you can
Pay up a fine.
Non-cognizable means police cannot arrest.
Correct.
Suo you have to put the case in
So
front of
these
a
are slightly
magistrate.
more friendlier measures to
Yes,
ensure compliance.
absolutely.
We are almost in the last segment of the program, and Dr. Trivedi, I wanted to begin this last segment with you and quickly ask you if you can very briefly talk what will be the impact of this legislation on the ship, recycling industry.
To the best of my understanding, this has been the demand for the countries who have the largest gross tonnage registered with them. There's always been this little thing that why don't you have a better pollution environment, better controlled ship rising. My assessment is that there will be more ships available. If we were number one, probably we'll go better than that.
Yeah.
And this is the impact on the recyclers in terms of profit and loss. That's one thing. But the impact on the GDP, impact on the employment, this is a very high employment ratio.
Employment generating industry.
About 40,000-50,000 people are employed.
50,000 directly and 1.5 lakh indirectly, and we are getting a lot of steel, recycled steel.
Great. Sanjay, close the program for us and tell us as to, you called it a reformist legislation in the beginning.
Yeah, see, I must say that this bill doesn't come into effect right now, because we will synchronize it when the Hong Kong Convention is implemented in the world, because we don't want to make our recycling industry non-profitable. And Hong Kong, for Hong Kong Convention to come into force, there has to be at least 15 countries with a gross tonnage of nearly 3% of the combined tonnage of the world. So we'll synchronize, and 2 years from the after fulfilling this condition. So we'll synchronize the different sections and chapters of this bill with the Hong Kong Convention coming into force. And I foresee that with this, lot of European Union countries will be sending these ships to us.
So the industry will increase.
And we will get so much of steel